I have been paying attention to the Mixtape situation because I find it very interesting. For those who don't know, Mixtape is a game that got released recently that has 10 out of 10 for every single gaming outlet, including IGN. And it's a little bit suspicious that a game, once again, where you literally don't have to press a single button through the whole entire 3-hour experience, got such high reviews when it literally could just be a movie and it's just woke millennial slop. Then you find out more and more details about it and it's like, oh, this is legitimately an industry plant. Like, it's not an allegation, it's true. The woman who made it, she is the daughter of Larry Ellison, one of the richest man in the whole entire world beside Elon Musk. And on top of it, recently came out, and he might have this in his video, it's 3 days ago, so maybe he probably won't. So I'll mention it now. Apparently, they got perpetual licenses. There we go. It's about music, right? It's no nostalgia bait slop stuff. They got perpetual licenses for the music within the game, and that shit's expensive. Unbelievably mind-blowing, expensive per song. Not even GTA has perpetual licenses in their video games because of how expensive it is. I read this off Twitter, so take it with a grain of salt. But that could be 50,000 to 500,000 depending on the song. One song can be in between the price range. It depends on the popularity when it came out, various other factors, etc, etc. And this game has multiple songs and perpetual licenses for all of them. All of them. A little bit suspicious that an indie game, quote unquote, can have perpetual licenses for multiple songs. Just a little bit sussy-wussy there. 3, 2, 1.
Hey internets, so it appears that GamerGate is trending yet again, alongside more proof of the fact that game journalists aren't really gamers, but rather they can be more or less described as an interconnected, corrupt group of ideologues who have taken over the industry and then used their platform to basically spread propaganda. Mostly neo-Marxist propaganda. To those of us who have researched this topic and looked into the industry at large, this is an obvious fact. But
my personal opinion is that GamerGate's never ended. It's just ongoing here. I mean, we got my favorite person ever, Anita Sarkeesian. Gamers don't have to be your audience. Gamers are over. I remember that one from back in the day. A guide to ending gamers. It's so dangerous to go alone. Why are gamers so angry? We might be witnessing the death of an identity. The death of the gamers and the woman who killed them. Ooh, so powerful. Sexism, misogyny, and online attacks. It's a horrible time to consider yourself a gamer. Gaming is leaving gamers behind. I think I remember that one too. It was all like part of a coordinated attack because it's, all industry made. I don't take the threat seriously, especially though it's coming from Anita Sarkeesian, because I know a lot of them were actually fake back in the day. I'm sure some of them were actually real because she did get a lot of blowback for what she was doing, being Subversive's little snake. Not even a little snake, she's a massive, huge snake. Like, she went to the United Nations with Zoe Quinn, the same woman who drove a man to suicide, and then completely just, cannibalized his company. They don't deserve any respect or any reputation, yet they're still here, still cooking, and still going on.
To those of us who have researched this topic and looked into the industry at large, this is an obvious fact. But to many people, it still remains elusive. And so it's nice to have yet another piece of pretty strong evidence to point out the fact that, again, game journalists are not gamers. And this all really comes down to the drama surrounding the game that recently got released, Mixtape, and how the game is just kind of a stereotypical, highly astroturfed woke schlop. Nearly every game journal publication just suddenly randomly gave this game a 10 out of 10. It started out with overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, which of course is a thing that can happen legitimately, but many people noticed that this was not legitimate at all. Well, there's no smoking gun to make a long story.
Oh, Banhammer. Schizotyne, this just seems odd to me. There's more positive reviews than maximum players for Mixtape. Around over 1,000 extra positive review. It's not unusual in itself, but it's only a pattern you see with much older games, at least 3 years older, like Skyrim, Left 4 Dead 2, or Elden Ring, because good reviews accumulate over the years. Mixtape just came out 4 days ago. It's not exactly 4 days ago by the time I'm watching this video and by the time this video came out, but still. And already shows patterns seen almost only from games that are older than 3 years. This just seems out of the ordinary for me. Yeah, that's just a little bit sussy-wussy, just a little bit suspicious.
Of the drama short, there's some pretty strong evidence to suggest that this is fake that many people have already gone into, so I won't really go too much into that. What I will point out instead are the things I believe most people are missing with this, which is that even if all of these reviews for Mixtape were in fact entirely genuine and truly coming from these journalists as their actual real opinion, and so despite the evidence of billionaire backing and nepo baby devs pretending to be indie devs, let's just pretend that all of these journalist reviews are entirely real, that the journos actually actually sincerely believe it is a 10 out of 10 game. Because I would argue that if they really do believe this, then it is actually just as, if not more, delegitimizing to the game journalist industry than if they were bribed to give all these positive reviews. Because I decided to do the thing. I decided to actually, well, sort of play the game, to see what all the fuss was about, and to see if this was a something burger or a nothing burger that I could just ignore. Because again, sometimes culture war things matter, and sometimes it's just stupid slop. This is one of the times that it turned out it mattered. Now,
Yeah, unfortunately, because of how much poison they put into the industry, because of Nina Sarkeesian, because of Zoe Quinn, because of Brianna Wu, the list goes on and on. Sweet Baby Inc. and the different baby incorporations that exist out there. It does leave people sometimes swinging at ghosts when there's it's been a quiet month. Because there's usually some new controversial story that comes out like once a month of gaming being subverted by these things. Because woke is not dead. It's not going out. DI is not dead. They're just changing the name under bridge and taking one step back to take two steps forward later when they feel like they have a better chance. But they're still pushing this stuff out. They still want to make it happen. This game's an example of it. The Odyssey casting is an example of it. Slay the Spire 2 having Nina Sarkeesian and the credits for consulting thing. It's just these are all new things. It just proves the fact that they've been at it for years now. They're just learning how to hide it better.
fortunately for me, I didn't actually have to physically buy the game or play it myself, because Mixtape is really just a story. It is more like an interactive movie than a real game, which by itself, that doesn't automatically make it a bad game. I mean, there's plenty of visual novels and story-based games out there. Tons of RPG games are just story-driven. But when I watched this game, basically just by watching somebody else stream it, I noticed a lot of problems that stood out. Here's just a quick mini review. The problem with the quote-unquote game is that it's a story-based game with a very predictable and very generic story. But the thing that shows the problem with game journalists is how it's supposed to be a nostalgia bait story, but it doesn't actually do that if you're a gamer. And I wouldn't even say it's that bad, as in it horrible 1 or 2 out of 10 bad. It's more like this game story is a solid 4 out of 10, or a forgettable D+ experience.
I know 5 is technically mid, right? It's supposed to be the middle. And like 7's when you actually start getting to like a good game. 6 to me is like a certified bleh to me when it comes to a game. Because I know 5 is supposed to be mid, but 5 is just like, for a video game, video games cannot be mid. They can't go under like a 6. Because like once you get past that point, they're basically unplayable. You're wasting your time. There are millions of other games out there that have been released throughout the years. And even your old head who's been around since like the 80s and 90s and have played all of them. There's still good legit indie games out there. There's still anime to watch. Other things you can do with your time. Because games are supposed to be entertainment. They're supposed to be relaxing. They're supposed to be fun. And if something is a 5 out of 10, and video games are usually pretty long. It's not like a movie where you waste 2 hours of your life. You go to a theater with your family, and like the movie sucks or whatever the case is, it's a 5 out of 10. But you know, you still had a fun time with your friends or family. With a game, you're usually sinking a few hours into it, more than 2, and you just wasted your fucking life, literally, in that point. You can't have a game less than like a 6 without it being just basically dog shit. And for it to be rated a 4, yeah, that's just bad. That's just straight up bad. Like, I know it's only slightly less than a 5, right? But, you know, it's slightly under mid, technically what the rating scale is, but not when it comes to video games. This does not work that way.
Specifically, the plot is extremely midwit coded. It panders to the type of normie that doesn't want to accept the fact that they are a normie, where they seem to think that listening to pseudo-alternative music is enough to qualify them as an intellectual. A TLDR of the plot is that you have this group of teenage friends who are going to be attending a party, and they need to find booze for the party, and as they're looking for booze, they run into various things that either trigger a cutscene or trigger a minigame, with the story basically being a generic coming-of-age story. And there's a few huge problems that stand out for this. The first is that the minigames are apparently completely unlosable. Nothing you actually do can result in a failed score. The person I watched streaming this noted this quite often. It's interactable, but nothing you actually do does anything. There's no way to actually fail the mission, even though one of these scenes is a major platforming section. But it is a platforming section that is unlosable. If the character fails to dodge a car, for example, they'll just kind of slide over the car instead. In other words, game journalist difficulty is the default and only difficulty mode. No need to actually be any good at the game. And that's not even the biggest problem. Another issue is how the story is effectively what I would call an example of woke washing.
before we get into the story and the woke washing type of stuff, like that to me is not a game. That's like a barely, and I wouldn't even say like an interactable movie. I used to really like Black Mirror back when that started really coming out on Netflix all those years ago now. And I remember they did an interactive movie where your choices did actually kind of matter. It was really weird, very experimental. I don't think they ever did it again, but you would actually have to interact with it and make your choices, and you would get different scenes based off those choices, and then you have to go back and replay it again. And it's not like a video game where you're pressing different buttons or fighting anything, but your choices did matter to tell the story. I forget what the Black Mirror episode was called, but that's an interactable story in my personal opinion. Versus this game, like, it's not interactable because what you're pressing doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter what you do. I saw it was like this 5 minute clip on Twitter where she just didn't touch the controller whatsoever, going through this whole platform phase is what he's talking about here. And there's no consequences to the actions like he's saying. There's nothing. Like, it just runs. And the character trips over something, picks herself back up, and then she starts running again, or slides through the car, jumps over the fence, or whatever the situation is. Like, that's not a game. That's not even interactable. There's no consequences. Your choices don't matter. At least with Bandersnatch, it was really simplistic, but I did have to go back over again and redo it to see the alternate endings. There's none of that here. It's like one of those toddler interactive things. I say interactive, but I still don't even think that's actually applicable here. Where you press the button and it lights up, right? It doesn't even really do that in this game. Like, it's just not a game.
As I happen to be one of the people who was born in the 80s, and I came of age in the 90s. So you would think that a nostalgia bait game based in the mid-1990s, as well as the fact that the area that the game takes place is very similar to the area that I grew up in, I would have thought that this game would have given me a fix for nostalgia. But it didn't. It completely failed. Because all of the dialogue in the game and everything the characters go through is heavily politically correctified. Because these kids do not talk or act like 90s kids. Rather, they talk like a heavily Disney-fied version of them, where nearly all of the very much not politically correct banter that you would normally talk like in the 90s has been completely removed. And then, of course, they top it off with the usual DEI representation characters. And it is all, again, very mid-wit coded. None of the characters are like...
The immigration problem that we're facing in America starts after 1965 with the Hart-Celler Act. The demographics of the 90s were still decently white. Obviously, we had the blacks suffered from slavery. Yeah, we had a couple Mexicans thanks to the amnesty from Reagan in the 80s. Yeah, there's a couple Asians here and there. Oh, but it was, if you look back at old videos, because 90s, for us fellow Zoomers in here, because I am a Zoomer myself, there was videotapes of high schools in the 90s. It's still majority whites. Meanwhile, with this game, you have a white girl, you have a darker skinned man, and then an Asian chick. It's very diverse. In the 60s, before the Hart-Celler Act, America was 90% whites. Today, in the year of the Lord 2026, it is 50% whites. Within a single generation. And yet they're trying to take this nostalgia bait 90s fucking shit and just woke wash it. That's exactly what they're doing here. Even if I wasn't born in the 90s, right, I still know kind of what it was like because we literally have the records. It wasn't even that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And in small towns, it probably was like 99% white, yes.
Rather, the story reminded me specifically of the painfully average kids who would spend their days getting high and listening to music and then getting high again and then listening to more music again, and round that goes. That's pretty much their entire life. Those are the kinds of kids I directly made an effort to avoid back then, and honestly still disassociate myself from today because they're just boring people. They just kind of exist in a state of constant vibes and having no real thoughts of their own, and honestly, they don't really ever grow out of that from what I've seen. A lot of them tend
normies. He's describing normies.
And to just kind of stay that way as adults. But more importantly, and the big issue here, is that they're not gamers. Because that's the big thing missing from this supposed nostalgia game. It's a game about 90s nostalgia that includes no 90s gaming. Yes, that's right. That's the thing I noticed when watching this thing. As you go through these characters' rooms and you look around, there's no gaming. It's all just generic band groupie schlop stuff. And that's a really key issue here. A nostalgia game aimed at gamers should have some gaming nostalgia to it. For instance, expect expecting to see a scene where you walk up to a Sega Genesis or something, or at least an NES or an Atari or a Super Nintendo, and talk about games, and reminiscent about the old games, you'd think you'd want to include that. That is, unless, of course, your target audience for this nostalgia is not for gamers. Like, for
Well, of course not. I mean, the friend group has two women in it, and one of them's Asian. In the 90s, women didn't play video games. It was a 100% male-dominated hobby, and a lot of them were bullied for it, even by other men in a lot of cases. Like, gamers were literally a repressed species for the longest time. And it wasn't until, like, the early 2010s that it finally started becoming cool and more acceptable with like YouTube, with the Let's Players like PewDiePie, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, though I know Markiplier and Jacksepticeye a little bit later in the game. If they're gonna make a game about nostalgia baiting gamers, women shouldn't be involved in it at all, other than the cute hot chick at school that the guy has a crush on, but is a little bit too nervous to talk to. But of course, like he says, this game isn't made for gamers. It's just woke propaganda because Larry Ellison's daughter wanted to make a movie, but has been unsuccessful. So this is her second best bet here.
example, one of my best memories from that time is playing GoldenEye with my friends. Or if not with friends, playing Shinobi 3 at 2 a.m. on a Friday night. That's the kind of time that you had if you were an actual gamer from those days. And the weirdest part is they even seem to tease it. These seem to be upper middle class kids in Northern California. And so they have things like TVs and computers in their own room, and yet attached to this classic CRT TV is no games. Where are the games? There's no games. Error 404, gaming nostalgia not found. Because of course, this nostalgia story is not for gamers. Rather, it's a nostalgia story aimed at the upper middle class normie who eventually goes to college on their parents' dime, to then go get a liberal arts degree, and to then get indoctrinated into far left progressive politics, and then ultimately land a job as a game journalist. Even though they never were a gamer, never will be a gamer, but they convince themselves that because they prescribe to the correct ideology, that they therefore know better about games than gamers. And so that's really what this mixtape drama, what we're really seeing here under the hood. Even if we were to take all of the good reviews in good faith and pretend like it's not astroturfed, then it still shows that game journalists are the types of people who honestly don't really enjoy video games. Which then brings up the question, is it astroturfing or is it just journos legitimate?
They don't enjoy video games. Like the infamous Cuphead journalist, game journalist, who struggled at the tutorial, a very basic tutorial. And I know Cuphead's supposed to be a challenging game. I've never played it myself. I remember it's supposed to be like a hard, like parkour game with like a good story with it. But it's a tutorial to teach you the controls. And you watch the tutorial and it's very simplistic, literally laid out, spelled out for you, clear as day, with animations as well, for how to do the tutorial there. And the game journalist spends a solid 5 minutes confused on what to do. He finally figures one thing out after like a minute of fucking around, gets to the next section of it, and struggles again, and the cycle repeats to the whole entire thing. And he didn't even get to the tutorial because of this. And that guy gave Mixtape a 10 out of 10. He said it was one of his favorite games. That's why you can't trust gaming journalists. Not even IGN, which used to be the gaming review website that you would go, and if IGN gave it a good score, you knew it was a good game. Now it's literally a fucking meme. IGN 10 out of 10 here.
Games. Which then brings up the question, is it astroturfing or is it just journos legitimately having terrible tastes as a result of them, again, not really being gamers? And the answer, honestly, is probably just a little bit of both. There's a lot of things that people have uncovered about this game and its backing that is...
Let's see here. Wow, these mixtape packages that A_I sent out contain fully functioning CD player and retro headphones straight from the game. This is so cool. Okay, what? Once again, this is supposed to be an indie game, by the way. How does an indie game have the funding to give a fully functioning CD player and retro headphones straight from the game? Like custom headphones from the game. And then the community note is, this is such a blatant advertisement for a product that's not being disclosed as such. You think so? And the quote tweet is, published by the daughter of the 5th richest man in the world, which is Larry Ellison. I think he's higher than 5th. Government funding, fully licensed soundtrack despite being indie, perfect scores, expensive gift sets sent to content creators, mixtapes industry plant, you can't convince me otherwise. Yes, no indie game should have the funding for this, especially without any grassroots major online support, where you hear about for ages about how excited people are for the game, right? But even then, like with how the graphics are, which they're not amazing, but they're not horrible either, like it still would be expensive, plus the voice acting. And then just the licensed soundtrack still gets me every single time because the perpetual licenses are so fucking expensive.
Very obviously fishy. Or as I pointed out on X, you do not need to be a conspiracy theorist to see something is wrong with these initial overwhelmingly positive Steam reviews for Wokeschlop. Again, Mixtape just being the latest iteration of it. Access journalism makes it very easy for them to pull off these kind of reviews, and of course there's a very strong incentive for them to do this. Not just because faking reviews for a game can get more sales for the game, but also because of the same issue I talked about previously in my long-form video on the Sweet Baby incident and GamerGate 2. Which is that the game industry in the West, as well as game journalists for quite some time now, has been completely taken over by people who subscribe to a neo-Marxist progressive ideology, and that this takeover isn't really a natural product of the free market, but rather is due to a complex web of corruption bred by a relationship with the corporate media and the
I can already tell just at a glance this is a great infographic. We'll start from the left to the right. Federal Reserve Bank gives money to BlackRock, too big to fail asset management. Then down below, money printer go brrr, also goes back to BlackRock. Federal Reserve Bank stretches to the White House with all being revolving door backroom deals. Same with BlackRock, also connected to the White House that same way. BlackRock is connected to Vanguard because they're the same situation, and both BlackRock and Vanguard go all the way down to Sweet Baby. And with Sweet Baby goes to the games, and then everything else. It also has direct influence, ESG. We gotta love our scores there. Cult of Woke, indirect influence, and then the White House also connects to Cult of Woke because politicians, ESG, and then the so-called free market, and also Sweet Baby Inc. And then White House goes down to regulation subsidies based on ESG metrics, self-fulfilling policy control, and that is all the free market combined all together with all those tendrils connecting everything here. If you were to lay this out to a normie, all the things BlackRock and Vanguard have done, more specifically BlackRock, but both are included with this, they'll think you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, even going through like one situation with it, just because of how inherently evil they are. Not like any normie can do anything about it. Not like we can really do anything about this. It's not going to be easy. We're still going to have quite a few years of bullshit before things would even change.
State that is ultimately designed to make sure that some very unpleasant people remain in charge, with woke progressives just being another form of useful idiots that they use to that end. Because of course, their solution to everything is effectively just that the government is corrupt, and the solution is more government, and that if we just taxed the right people, we could have free stuff. And the whole DEI ideology that gets pushed in the media, it's all just another arm of the structure of the corrupt system. And as for what's specifically going on here with Mixtape, well, it's really just the same thing as the original GamerGate, just targeting a more specific area of the games industry. Because the original GamerGate can be summarized as neo-Marxists trying to take over the gaming industry by injecting itself entirely into games journalism, thus ensuring that games were largely being given positive reviews based more so on whether or not those games were pushing the correct ideology, aka the neo-Marxist ideology, rather than reviewing them for, actual gameplay, the things that gamers care about. And one of the things that the establishment failed at when it came to the original GamerGate is that one, gamers didn't really like it, thus allowing boycotts to actually work, but two, it really only hit the AAA game dev scene. Indie devs have had some wokeness in them too, but only when the developer themselves is an actual true believer. But the indie dev scene, due to the nature of it being indie, also has plenty of anti-woke developers, like those behind the Great Rebellion. And so Mixtape seems to me like an attempt to remedy this past mistake.
Is it actually good? I'm assuming it is, seeing that he's bringing this up and he has the play button, which means he's actually bought it. Last played today. But I mean, hey, having actual purposeful anti-woke people making video games is a good thing too.
What the corporate journoids seem to be doing now may very well just be an attempt by the establishment to take over the indie dev game scene by falsely labeling games with large amounts of establishment funding behind them as quote-unquote indie, then having game journals give it a bunch of heavily inflated reviews, which allows them to then ensure that the latest Wokeschlop propaganda title, whatever it may be, is always at the top of the indie game charts as well, and wins Indie Game of the Year purely by brute force of establishment astroturfing.
I know I'm gonna believe that conspiracy theory because that makes complete fucking sense. Everything he just said, it sounds completely like what the industry would actually do. This is all super incestuous.
That's what appears to be really happening here. Pretty disgusting and petty, to be honest. It's almost as if the AAA game devs and corporate journos got mad that the indie game dev scene is starting to outperform the schlop that they have been pushing for.
And the 2026 Game of the Year goes to Mixtape! The worst thing about Mixtape is that it'll 100% win Indie Game of the Year over actual video games that deserve it. Yeah, more than likely. More than fucking likely. Sadly.
For the past 20 years. And so this just seems to be their new strategy. Falsely label their schlop propaganda title as indie, and then make sure it's given widespread praise. However, the problem though with their tactic is that people have already kind of caught on to it, and thus the same strategies that were effective in GamerGate can be used against this nonsense. For one, just don't buy their game. Take the gatekeeper's pledge. Refuse to buy propaganda schlop. It's really that simple. And also just spread the word and be aware of the fact that corporate journalists for the game industry should rightfully be seen as completely irrelevant. Corporate game journalism as it currently exists and stands today should again be viewed as an entirely fraudulent industry. It's not just Mixtape that is an AstroTurf title, rather it's game journalism as a whole that is an AstroTurfed industry. And this shouldn't even be seen as a conspiracy theory, this should just be seen as a matter of fact by your average gamer. And then of course on the political side of things, we can just look to events like this as more further proof that the solution to our corrupt government and corrupt system is not more government. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to support me, you can do so on Ko-Fi, Subscribestar, or by
The solution is never more government, by the way.
buying some merch. Which, by the way, for the sake of this video, I'm going to put the Gamers Rise Up merch on a limited time sale. The mug especially is pretty good quality, one of my personal favorites. But anyway, again, that is all. Thanks again for watching. Till next time.
The solution is never more government. And never trust the gaming journalists.
Are definitely real people.
Don't believe a word they're saying. Don't trust them. If anything, you know, if they give it something a 10 out of 10, it's shit. If they give it like a 3 out of 10, it's actually probably good. And just keep on playing your games. Like for me, being a Zoomer and living under a rock and spending most of my life not being able to play video games, I have a plethora of games to get through. So I'm not like worried about myself for like new games and finding new stuff to do and play. But I do feel bad for the older gamers, right? You know, the OG ones from the 80s and 90s. Finding new games is getting harder and harder. I mean, they definitely still exist out there, and there's definitely good indie games, like I mentioned earlier. Just watch anime, so it's like possible to still entertain yourself, but it's a lot more difficult. And I do feel bad for them. Just keep your eye out. You know, don't fall for the psyops. You know, trust your local, you know, YouTuber who does the game reviews, whatever the case is, and just carry on with your life. Work out, you know, learn a different skill, and try to make the best improvements in the meantime. I did put the link in chat there to watch the video, so please do press the like button for it. Watch the video yourself. It's, you know, relatively short. I am just the React slopper. He put in the work. GamerGate never ended. It really never ended.